Hi everyone, welcome to the visual guide for the Heroes Gauntlet. This is the brand new MSQ dungeon made available by patch 5.3 in Final Fantasy XIV, Reflections in Crystal. Before you throw down the gauntlet, go berserk and dash headfirst into the whirlwind of battle. Understand that your healers probably don't want to raise you from the dead, so be careful. My name is MTQ and I'll be your dungeon guide. In the first part of the dungeon, spectral adds will spawn as you get near them. Tanks, be sure to pick up everything as soon as possible. You'll notice a ton of AoE attacks going out, so make sure you watch your feet. Some familiar NPCs will also come to your aid as you make your way through. The first boss is the Spectral Thief. Spectral Dream will target the primary target for 3 heavy-hitting attacks. Tanks and healers beware. Next, the boss will cast Dash, and an arrow marker will appear somewhere on the platform. A large attack circle and a green orb countdown will also appear around the boss. The circle attack will not go off until the countdown around the boss completes, which seems to occur immediately after the boss dashes to the arrow marker. To handle this, identify where the boss will be dashing to and move out of that area before the countdown completes. You'll see this type of teleport attack mechanic a lot this patch, so make sure you're paying attention. Spectral Whirlwind will do moderate group-wide damage, shield and heal as necessary. Next up, all players will be targeted by these circle AoE markers and hit by Spectral Gust. Spread apart to avoid overlapping damage. When the boss casts Chicken Knife, a number of untargetable adds will appear around the platform. These adds will throw out long line attacks towards players that must be avoided. The boss will then cast Shadow Dash. A large line attack will form through him and 2 arrow markers will appear on the platform. This is the same teleport attack mechanic as before, but you have 2 destinations to watch out for. Players will need to reposition into the eventual safe area to avoid the attacks once he dashes to the 2 markers. At this point, these mechanics will repeat until the boss is down. Remember to reposition in advance before every teleport attack to avoid excess damage and death. The next section of trash takes us into Ilmeg to fight even more spectral soldiers. Make sure you take full advantage of your friendly NPC help to bring them down quickly. Don't forget to avoid those AoEs. The second boss is the Spectral Necromancer. Absolute Dark 2 is a massive AoE cone. Make sure you move out of it as necessary. When the boss casts Necromancy, 4 dark circles will spawn 4 Necrobomb zombies that tether to players. These zombies may either be upright or crawling on the ground. Regardless, they fixate and chase after their respective players. Players can minimize damage a bit here by staying out of melee range of their zombies. Eventually, the upright zombies will lose interest and plop over wherever they happen to be on the platform. The boss will eventually cast Necroburst, and each zombie will explode in a small AoE circle. Players will need to move away from the corpses to avoid excess damage. You can also control where the zombie corpses end up by guiding them away from the group before they collapse. While this is happening, the boss will target the primary target with Twisted Touch, a heavy-hitting Tankbuster. Healers, don't forget to keep an eye on that tank health. Large AoE circles will cover the platform and players will need to move out of these to avoid bleed damage. Another round of zombies will spawn, this time crawling. These zombies will snare their players in place, making it impossible to move for the incoming attacks. To handle this, players will need to spread far enough apart in advance to avoid future overlap. Healers will need to be ready to heal through the AoE and Necroburst damage. Chaos Burst will deal moderate group-wide damage. At this point, the mechanics will repeat with increased overlap and difficulty. 2 rounds of both upright and crawling zombies can spawn at the same time. To handle this, players can drag the upright zombies until they fall over. They'll also need to avoid overlapping AoE attacks and continue moving until the crawling zombies snare them. As long as the players aren't too close to each other, the damage should be reasonable. This final section of trash has the same style of pulls as before. Watch for those AoE attacks and burn everything down. The final boss is the Spectral Berserker. Beastly Fury will do group-wide damage and add danger zones around the edges and corners of the platform. Stay out of these zones to avoid extra bleed damage. Wild Anguish will target a random player with this stack-up marker. Group up to share the damage. This attack will also apply a magic vulnerability up debuff on you for a few seconds. When the boss casts Wild Rage, a large blue marker will appear on the platform. The boss will then jump to this marker, knocking back all players from that position. To avoid getting punted into the outer edges, players can reposition their characters or use the knockback immunity. This attack will also leave behind a crater. Standing in this crater will cause players to quickly gain stacks of a bit berserk. Should you reach 8 stacks, you will go fully berserk and lose control of your character. For now, keep out of the crater. Next up, all players will be targeted by these large AoE circles. Move apart to avoid overlap. Falling rocks will dump on each player that will persist for some time. Immediately after, each player will be targeted by the Wild Anguish stack-up markers. Since this attack also afflicts you with that magic bone up debuff, players will not be able to stack together to share the damage. Instead, they'll need to stack with the rubble left behind by the falling rocks to survive. The boss will jump to all 4 players in turn before resuming his attacks. Eventually, the boss will move to an edge and cast Wild Rampage, dealing lethal damage to all players. To survive this, players can hide inside the craters, taking taking care not to stay in there long enough for their stacks to hit 8. When the boss casts Raging Strike, he'll turn to a random player and lift up his flaming sword. All players will want to move out from in front of the boss to avoid the incoming massive line attack. He'll do this attack a few times in a row, so watch your butts. At this point, all of these mechanics will repeat until the boss is down. There will be slightly less room to work with since 2 craters will now cover the platform, but all mechanics are still handled in the same manner. If you have any questions or comments, please let me know. Up next, we'll head into the newest trial, the Seat of Sacrifice. As always, thanks for watching. Till next time.